Vin, welcome back, brother. How you doing?
Hey. Good. I'm doing great.
Yeah, you're
How
in
are
a, I won't name where you are, but you're incognito.
I'm on a tropical paradise. I'll say that. It is definitely a tropical paradise. With what I will say is it's the weird luxury of right now. My wife and kids, as they have been throughout the week, are out at a major beach of the place that I am currently located to where we have relocated, and no one on the beach is wearing a mask, and
But
people are.
haven't you heard vitamin D is not healthy for you, man? You got to stay indoors.
No, people are out and about and enjoying themselves. They're windsurfing, they're kite surfing, they're frolicking in the ocean, they're mingling between cohorts and fishing, enjoying themselves, playing on the sand, and no social distancing. And there are police officers there making sure people are safe, as they would be at any other time. Police just making sure things are cool on the beach, but not enforcing any kind of social distancing or masks or anything like that. One interesting thing here is, and I think it's a good example for how things can go down, is that the only kind of social distancing and mask wearing has been enforced at the private level. So
Mm.
stores, most of the stores are open, like even quote unquote non-essential businesses. A great deal of them are open. There's things that are closed because the island's pretty much cut off to tourists, and so like a lot of restaurants are only doing takeout and whatnot, but and others are shut down just because there's not a good amount of traffic. But the businesses that are open, grocery stores and what ever little other shops, it's they'll just say no mask, no entry, right? So have a mask, and then they'll say, they'll have a sign, practice social distancing. And most people are, if the business says do that or else you can't shop here, then people go for it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
what more do you need? But in terms of out on the streets, there's people playing basketball, there's people fishing together, there's people just congregating in various different places in public. Nobody's tripping on them. The police aren't tripping. And there's like no cases here. So it can work.
Last time we spoke, it was a while ago, and lots have changed since then. Um, you left a lot of new policies. It seems like all the rule books is out. Rule book on fiscal policy is out. Rules on what's happening with the federal overreach is out. States are realizing they have superseding power to supersede federal power, which, like, ooh, shocker. That's how the United States was originally. Oh, it's a fucking republic. You know what I mean? Like, wow. What's, and you got you've been following this for a very long time. Where do you think we're heading?
Well, I've been saying that we're entering into the dim age. That's what I've been calling it, the dim age. And I think that means a fracturing, the end of the empire.
Mm.
And the question is, like, what is the empire? Like, the empire of what? I don't think it's the American empire. I don't think that we can say that these are like national empires anymore. These are like supranational empires. There's definitely there's a global culture. And we know that there's a global culture by seeing those who have been excluded from that culture, right? So let's say the North Korea by choice to a great degree, and Iran not by their choice, but like being forced into it by both the powers around them who are vying and by the United States, who is, depending on what you think, whether the United States is beholden to Israel and Saudi Arabia, or whether it's the other way around, who knows? Saudi and Israel, the one thing they can agree upon is they hate Iran, right? So it's like, that's, when you look at those two examples, and Russia to a certain degree, but I mean, Russia has, such a long relationship with the European powers that it's like, and with their sort of southern neighbors that used to be in their who's still in their sphere of influence, but used to be completely a part of their empire, and with China, that's hard to keep. It's hard to keep Russia out, and they've got oil, they've got natural gas, So when you look at the outliers, you start to see that like, oh, okay, yeah, there's this empire, and it looks like now we're seeing, as we see the WHO move, we see these UN organizations, we see these non-nation state actors, the Bill Gateses of the world and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It's like, why is this dude who's not a elected political leader, he has no position in government, how is he on the global news saying the lockdowns will not be lifted until we have XYZ? It's like, wait. When did you get to make that decision? But that's the revelation. Like, that's what's being revealed at the end of the empire, is like, who was really in control of the empire this whole time? Like, what was the empire? And I think that it's like the supranational forces that have combined within this global trade, this global network. I think it's probably like, if we're thinking of historical analogs, it's probably the closest is something like when the Mongol Empire, the Golden Horde, it was spread. It was spread from basically the Black Sea all the way to the Pacific, and up into Mongolia, Korea, and all of that. So it's like that. But it is very loose, and it was connected by trade and connected by some historical aspect. But I mean, stretched into Russia, they control.
It went all the way into Austria in Europe.
So we're talking. That's really, I think, more what it looks like, to where there is this loose idea of a shared culture. That is the culture that is sort of on top of language, nation, religion, country, but there's this culture that's on top. And I think that we see that's like World Economic Forum at Davos, all of that. So I think where we're headed is to the last act of this empire. So it's going to, I think, fully emerge as, okay, no more games, no more mask of there were these countries and all of that. I think that the global response, both the political response of locking people down, the economic response, which has been very much the same throughout the way that the central banks have responded, the sort of shutdown or not shutdown of trade, right? Certainly the shutdown of the labor markets has been a thing, but the shutdown of cargo hasn't necessarily happened. But we're seeing that this is going to be the final act. The masks are being pulled off. The real people who have been pulling the strings all along feel comfortable enough to step out and be like, yeah, I can say what's going to happen. And that is really what I think that we're headed to. It's hard to know, without getting too like conspiratorial and going into the kind of tinfoil hat realm, what this could look like. But I think that what we're seeing guaranteed is this idea of contact tracing just seems to have embedded itself on all sides of the political landscape. That it's the Overton window has been moved way, way out to where everybody is saying the vaccine is one thing. But I really do think that the vaccine is almost like a MacGuffin, like the Maltese Falcon. It's this idea of the thing that we're going toward. But everybody says, whether you're on the left, the right, whether you're in Europe, the US, Asia, the only way we're going to open these economies back up is if we do contact tracing. They just keep saying contact tracing. Every single one of them, the media, the politicians. What is and the things that they're suggesting? Mandatory contact tracing, the idea that we're going to know where you are 24/7. And that's definitely going to be tied into the financial aspect. Because if we know where you are, if we're tracing you in your physical, the digital has already been overlaid with the physical. We're addicted to our Google Maps and our GPS. So we've already overlaid the physical with the digital. They're going to be tracking our digital lives as well. We're moving into the central bank digital currencies, which are all about tracking again. And so I think that really what we see this is an entree, an excuse. This vaccine, all of this is an excuse to get into the panopticon, which has been the dream of authoritarians for as long as there have been authoritarians. This is like the wet dream. Is can I track every single person's activities and basically over the course of a few generations weed out anybody who is undesirable and that they don't follow exactly on the path.
Yeah, but my question I have is, okay, let's say you are part of a certain dynasty families in control. Do you chip your kids? What do you do with your own family? Because if they have an option to opt out, then I have an option to opt out. Same thing with money. Like you talk about central bank, how much offshore money there is. So what happens when there's now everything? What happens to their money then?
Well, I do think that we are going to have two separate, and we've talked about this before, right?
Yeah.
Is that there's going to be, I don't think it's two, I think it's three. And when we've looked at the people like Orwell in 1984 who have predicted what this might look like, who have taken the logical progression and moved it forward, it tends to be this three-tiered system. So in Orwell's, it's the inner party, the outer party, and the proles. And the idea that he gives is some idea that the real slaves are the outer party, the middle. They're truly the ones that you need to affect. And I think that what we're looking at now, where that will come out of, is the essential worker.
Yeah.
This idea of essential businesses, non-essential businesses, and the state writ large, right? So the state writ large, which is including the media, these supra-governmental organizations like the WHO and whatnot, people like Bill Gates, the pharmaceutical companies, right? So you've got this sort of fascist level that's up here, that is this, we'll call this the state. Then you have essential businesses. And these are going to be your construction. That's what you see. The first thing they're talking about opening up. Well, we'll open up some construction, right? It's construction, basic necessities, the large chain grocery stores, the big box stores, these large corporations. They're not the propaganda arm of the state. They're not the science arm of the technocracy, but they have they're tightly interwoven in that. And then you have that third tier, and the third tier is the proles, the non-essentials, and there will be a lot of, and we're already seeing it happen, right? Like people giving haircuts in their houses and things like that. There's going to be a lot more of that, and there's going to be so much of it that the state is just pretty much going to have to ignore it to a certain degree.
That's my thing. Like, you know what? If they want to come around and say, hey, we're going to chip people, I don't give a fuck as long as it's not mandatory. If it's mandatory, there's going to be full out conflict.
I don't think chipping is going to be necessary. I think that's too much of a stick.
Yeah.
I don't think that it ends up looking like that. I think it looks a little more like a carrot. So, and where it happens.
So if you opt in, you get all these benefits.
Well, that's the Orwell idea of the outer party, right? So Winston, the character in 1984, the sort of protagonist, is in the outer party, right? And it's interesting because throughout that book, he's constantly observing the proles, and he's having these sort of thoughts about the proles, how like, oh, they're able to kind of live their life and do their thing, and I'm really not. He sees them as much more free than him, even though they're living virtually on top of each other. The proles also view him with a high degree of suspicion. They don't want to give him access to that world. Inner party doesn't want to give him access to that world. Right? So the inner party, the people, the state, they have carte blanche. They could do whatever they want.
Whatever they want, yeah.
Whatever they want. Because there basically are no real laws, per se. And these things are we've reached that, right? The shit is being made up on the fly. when you've got mothers being arrested for having their kids play on a playground, when surfers being arrested for surfing, you've reached a point where, like, you're in 1984, where in the first pages, you know, he says that writing in his journal, he says, it wasn't illegal because nothing was illegal.
Yeah.
But he knew that if he was caught, it would be certain death.
I never understand those cops or law enforcement that follow these stupid. I don't understand them psychologically at all.
Well,
is their brain kind of like demented? Like, I don't get. Do they have common sense? Like, I get you're law enforcement, I understand, and I respect what you're doing. But come on, use some fucking common sense. Sometimes you're gonna arrest a guy on the beach.
No, it's brainwashing and it's culture, right? So it's a level of indoctrination.
Yeah.
And you have to have a culture of us versus them. And you have to have a culture of righteousness. And that's the reason why you know, they say, oh, not all cops are bad. It's like just a few bad apples. But it's like, yeah, but how many of those good apples actually turn in the bad apples before they go full bad and shoot somebody? Because when you're dealing with the psychopath, that wasn't the first sign that you had, right? You knew that he was beating his wife. You saw him do crazy shit to people on the street that was uncalled for, that like never got reported. You saw all that, but you didn't report it. And it's that. Well, this sort of goes to the idea of how you manipulate that outer party. And what happened in 1984 as well is that for them to just live their lives and get by, they have to break the law. And so if you're in a major police department, New York, Chicago, Toronto, it doesn't matter, large police department, you have been an accomplice to, if you're there for 10 years, you've been an accomplice to hundreds of acts that should have gotten you suspended or fired or maybe even thrown into prison for violating the law and the policy of the police department. But you have participated in covering those up for your fellow officers off the idea that, oh, if the shit hits the fan, brothers in arms, these guys will defend me, which they won't. They won't. Those same psychopaths would shoot you just as soon, right? But the idea, this narrative going on, and it's that divide and conquer. It's that us versus them, and the fact that we are seeing this level of absurdity, right? Where an officer would arrest a woman for having her child play on a playground. The fact that we're seeing that tells you that, like, we've reached the point where that indoctrination is so hardcore that it almost doesn't matter how crazy the laws get. We can pretty much be guaranteed that the police will enforce them without question. We can pretty much guarantee that. And the ones that won't will just basically be let go. But there's a critical mass that will. You know, some will quit for sure. There are definitely going to be police that quit in the next year over this shit. They're going to be like, I can't do it. But, you know, that's just going to leave space for the psychopaths to come in even more.
It's going to be interesting because the United States is a different dynamic than many countries. You have armed militia of private citizens that, like, literally it's like micro armies in certain states. But then, as we're talking before the show, is state by state armies. Like you mentioned, California has its own Navy. And so when you have federal laws that come down and state laws, like, well, fuck that, come and get me.
I mean, these governors now in the states, I thought since the beginning of this that there's a very good chance of a kind of a weird civil war happening. You know, basically all that a civil war means, like de facto, would be if they start shutting down the borders to interstate travel of individuals, right? So, like, if I can't just drive across the California-Nevada border without getting stopped in a checkpoint, you've had a de facto secession. Like, it's the United States is basically over. If I can't freely move between the states, they may be relatively like friendly to one another. There may be a degree of trade, but if I get stopped and it's like papers, please, as I move this way and the California National Guard stops me, well, we're not one country anymore. And I think that would fall into the narrative from a political standpoint, an economic standpoint, a financial standpoint. There is a lot to be gained by having that breakup happen, because you reduce the amount of power. It's much easier to control the individual little tyrants, right? Who are all basically underachievers. Like,
the question is who benefits. It's not the U.S. federal government; it's outside forces.
It is.
Because for me, if there is a silver lining, if it plays right, like the common enemy amongst even Russia, like this, there's a common denominator among men. It's China. It's a CCP.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm interested to see how this dynamic, like that's one thing that's bringing the left and right together in the United States. And a lot of people are agreeing, like we're not saying the Chinese people are fucking slaves in their own country. We're talking about the Chinese Communist Party, which is not a communist, it's a fucking dictatorship.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested to see how that narrative plays out in the United States.
Well, the United States is the consumer of those goods. So if, how China has played out over the last 50 years is they've basically decided that they're going to do state capitalism. They're going to be one big plantation, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's what they are. They're a slave plantation, a giant slave plantation. They've already implemented sort of the Orwellian state. And I think what we saw in the last, let's say, half century, or what people would say like took out the Soviet Union, was the importation of American culture and the idea for North American culture, really, we could say, right? And to a certain degree, British culture as well, although I don't think that the Brits have done particularly good in pushing liberty over the last 50 years, right? But certainly North American culture, pushing over into Russia, them importing all of those things. A lot of people say that was the decision that the Russian people made, and that their decision was, well, okay, we'd like to go in this direction. It's attractive. I think that we're seeing the opposite in many ways. So the vast demand for Chinese goods, the fact that almost everything consumed by Americans, and certainly what built Walmart and Target and Home Depot and all of these things, is the cheap exports coming from China. The fact you can't import a whole bunch of shit in the same way that the Soviet Union was trying to keep out American things. Why? Because the goods bring the culture.
Mm-hmm.
You import the goods, you import the culture. It has to be that. There's no, that's just an economic reality. And so, unwittingly, America imported the Chinese culture. And China's going to be a gigantic winner in this. But, it's been a revolving door. I mean, it's a global web. It's not like Western powers haven't been participating in the strength of China. I mean,
yeah. The thing I'd push back is because the U.S. currency is the hedge, and nobody gives a fuck about monopoly money of the renminbi. Nobody accepts it. It's Cuban pesos, pretty much. That is a massive
egg to the dollar.
Yeah.
Right. So technically the currency of China is the U.S. dollar. Technically, in name only is it the RMB, because if you have a peg, then that means I can just take the RMB to the bank, exchange it for some amount of dollars that you've set it, but it's dollars that everybody wants.
There's a trifecta though that China has disadvantage towards them. I would say four things. If this narrative continues, I see a global Cold War against them. Number two, what people don't know, after 1945, the United States made a super pact where they guaranteed the safety of all shipments around the world, because let's be honest, no one even comes close to their navy. China doesn't have a navy. United States can have a fucking army anywhere around the world in 24 hours. It's ridiculous powerhouse what they have. Number three, what China has done to oppress people in inner China, to immigrate Han population, whether that is Inner Mongolia, Cider provinces, etc. Yeah, those people don't forget, man. They're pissed. They're really, really pissed. So I wouldn't be surprised even you see certain CIA coups where they stimulate certain internal conflicts within China happening in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, I think that all of those things are very likely. And if we've shut down economies, and because we've shut down economies, supply chains are being destroyed. Like people haven't fully felt the destruction of many of the supply chains. We're hearing little things of food producers going under slowly, and it happens kind of slowly. But each little domino, each little link in the chain is linked to a whole bunch of other things. And it only takes a few critical pieces to go under before, boom, a lot of problems happen. And so if you have reduced consumptive power from the West, the U.S. in particular, and if you have a lowering of the variety of things that are coming in, just because businesses have gone under, including some businesses who are, let's say, Western businesses doing manufacture in China.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have that breakdown, then you're back at the old adage: if goods can't cross borders, armies will. And this is greatly reducing the interconnectedness of the economies of the U.S. and China. And I think that you're absolutely right in terms of the potential for war when that happens, because it's like, well, if you don't need each other, right? If you don't need each other from a trade standpoint, then yeah, I think it's a lot more likely. What such a war would look like and how long it would last is, again, probably Orwellian, where it's like, we are at war with East Asia. We have always been at war with East Asia. I think it could be that degree of war.
Yeah. There are ace cards. India's teams with United States. Their arch rival in that area is China, and we'd rather team up with India. They are a democracy, mind, whatever. Listen, I don't think that people really understand how fucked up the CCP is. Like, it's beyond fucked up. Like, it is. I don't know. I'll even tie them with North Korea, how they treat people. Like, it's that fucking bad.
Well, it's probably, I would say it's probably even beyond, because they're far more subtle, right? The level of control that they have is far deeper. It isn't just like the iron fist, where people understand, oh, step out of line and like you're gone.
Yeah.
But how deeply woven their control of the day-to-day population is, and what people in China will acquiesce to if the state demands it, it's actually unbelievable that you could have a population that big. And now, mind you, in the rural areas, you're not gonna have that same interaction. But in the big cities, and there's lots of big cities in China, people just go along, man. Like, it's just a normal part of
because it's preference falsification. On the surface, they're like that, but behind closed, this is what happened in USSR. Like, it's self-preservation. You don't want to publicly state certain things because, hey, you disappear. Like, case example with COVID, the lawyer that came out, where is he? He's dead for sure. The doctor, who knows? All these guys that spoke up early, like January 1st, or no, sorry, January 10th. Who knew? They're gone, man. Disappeared. Yeah.
That's the. I think that's coming everywhere, to be honest. Like, because it feels. Well, let's go to this. Let's go to this narrative about, and it's been an ongoing narrative, that the West should have reacted like China. That China is a great example of.
But who's spinning this media? That's my question. You know what I mean? Like, there's a saying too, a devil known is better than a devil not known. And I like the devil of North America much better than a devil of fucking China.
Well, but the question is, are they different devils? Are they really different devils at the end of the day?
I'm using the anchor of everyday people. So in North America, let's say Canada, United States, pretty much, well, not the same, but almost the same type of quote unquote freedoms, right? I can still practice a religion I want to practice. I can public.
Can you? Because the churches are closed.
Not right now, no. But in China, I can't. If I'm depending on where I am, I can't even practice a religion before all this stuff.
Right.
And I can't publicly even have a debate of why the government is doing bad things, or else I'm gone. At least in Canada, the United States, I can say, well, our president is not good. I don't like the policies he's suggesting. I don't like his cabinet, and we should vote. If I said that in China, I'm gone.
But I think that it it's just a matter of degrees in some way, because ultimately what they want is they want your voice removed from out of the public discourse.
I've always said, and you said this earlier, I'm glad you brought it up. I've always said the powers that win is the powers that export culture. Mm-hmm. And so for the last 50 years, the United States has export culture through Hollywood, through media, through Silicon Valley. And we have a little bit of export from China, but more or less because they don't have freedom of, you don't even call it, like Canada doesn't have freedom of speech like the United States does. The United States is probably the only rarest country. I can talk for the most part, certain things I'm not, but for the most part, I can say whatever the fuck I want in Canada to a certain degree. I can scrutinize the government. I can tell you fuck off, blah, 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 blah. And so these ideas propagate and they create this zeitgeist of culture that other people pick up. Like you go to Iran, it's American, Canadian culture. You go to China, you go to Japan, they're adopting the millennials are adopting the culture of the United States. No one's coming like, oh man, I really want to adopt the Chinese way of living under fucking CCP. Yeah. Sign me the fuck up.
Yeah, it's well, but the question becomes though, where is culture? I think that what culture is and how it's expressed has been different in the last 10 years. So if we go back to 70s, 80s, 90s, and what has been exported, then I think that you could really say that American culture could be identified, right? That this came from America. But I think that if you look in the last, let's say, 10 years, but really in the last 5 years, 10 years especially, is the globalization has happened to such a degree that it's like, especially when it comes to pop music, I dare you to tell, like a brand new artist comes out, I dare you to tell me what country that artist is from. I dare you, even just by looking at them, right? I dare you to tell, the last 10 years has seen, like Drake and The Weeknd. I don't think that anybody 30 years ago would have been like, oh yeah, Canada. These guys, I'm looking at these guys, I'm listening, and The Weeknd is like Ethiopian. So it's like the hodgepodge, the mix has done something such that it's almost, again, it's supernatural. Like the culture is supernatural. But I think that the culture that China has imported is a corporate culture. There's is it called The Factory? There's this Netflix documentary. I'll describe it, and you may have seen it, but it's
the Chinese billionaire that gets a factory in the United States.
A factory in the U.S., and then the U.S. people go to China and they see how basically.
China has penetrated deep in the United States on all levels. Kyle Bass, famous investor, he talks about this 24/7.
So this is what I mean by, where is culture? Like, how much of culture is determined by your, the clothing that you're wearing and the music that you're listening to, what we traditionally think of as the American culture that was exported, the movies that you're watching, and how much of it is dictated by how the place that you work treats you and how you move through your day, how your day is structured in the place that you work. And I think that if you look at the essential businesses now, and you look at their company policies, and you look at how they treat their employees, and you look at what's expected of their employees, to be cogs in a machine, it is very much more Chinese than it is what we think of traditionally with America. And the idea of like the union and all of that is really gone. Like that's those businesses are going to be put under. All of the businesses that formerly had unions, they're furloughing workers and shit from the government positions that had government unions, state workers unions and whatnot. We're coming. That's what I think is the culture that China brought, and it was just a matter of efficiency, right? It's that like, well, if we want to compete, we've got to behave in this way, and that's really being shown in that documentary, right? And it's I do think that that's a much more important aspect of culture, because it's the indoctrination, it's the Pavlovian conditioning of the worker, and that's what is carrying us through. That people are just, because it extends to listening to the government in the way that people are, to not question. People are not questioning the narratives, even though it's only been 60 days really with this bullshit. And every single narrative that was pushed, from how many people were going to die, to what measures were necessary, to ventilators were actually going to save people's lives, to we're going to need these hospital ships and these field hospitals, they've 100% been bullshit. Every one of them. 100% bullshit. Every single one of them has been walked back. And yet they come up with a new thing, and the exact same people who've been bullshitting you for 2 months have 80 to 90% of the population like, oh, okay, we'll just forget.
But that's normal, 89%. My theory of why the bullshit continues state by state is no different than happening. Is actually the same as corporations, states, hedge funds, you name it. We'll call them entities. All of them realize once the Fed open up the war chest, they can get money. Mm-hmm. And so I look at human beings as incentive-based creatures. We're irrational, but we're very easily predictable. Yeah. And so it's like, oh, money. Okay, how do I get more money? Oh, I have to be more of a victim. Oh, I got to propagate my numbers. I got to get more in debt. Okay. Help me. We have a 50,000 debts and $3 billion in debt, blah, blah, blah. Give me the fucking Federal Reserve fucking helicopter money. So everybody is trying to make their situation as worse as possible. Like, fuck, today I put it on Twitter. The Fed is bailing out states. They're buying out the debt of states. Like, fuck. You guys might end up coming like Canada, where it's just one, like no states, like is like a one centralized government.
Well, but it's not government. That's what's so interesting. And that's why I think when we talk about like it goes right back to the idea of the reveal, the big reveal of who's really in charge. All the people who've been saying, pay attention to the central bankers, we're a part of that group. But I think that that's been such esoteric knowledge to most people, because most people are like, oh, no. It's like the president. It's like Trump and this guy that you elect, and it's the prime minister and it's the queen and this. No. It hasn't been that for a very,
very long time. Yeah.
Right? And it's these guys in the background running these central banks. And the reason why they have power is because money printer go burr.
Yep.
And they put you into debt.
Yep.
And then they can bail you out of the debt, and then they own you.
Yeah. That's IMF strategy. They go around the world like, hey, Africa, you want $100 billion? Sure. You can't pay it back. Well, give me all your water.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is that game works because what they've realized very astutely that the population has not realized is that the people with the most political power are a bunch of fucking psychopaths.
Oh yeah.
They're a bunch of greedy.
They have to be to be in that position. Yeah.
How do you rise to become a dictator in an African country if you're not an absolute psychopath?
Yeah. And this is the thing that people understand. They call them evil, but I'm like, they're not. I'll tell you why. In their mind, they're just. It's not like they wake up like, oh, I'm Dr. Evil. No, what I'm doing is just, and I believe it's for the greater good.
Well, Robert Hare is Dr. Robert Hare, who's the inventor of the Hare psychopathy checklist. It's something everybody should know.
Oh, I heard about this before. Yeah.
He's studied psychopathy, which we really don't. To be honest, we use the term psychopath, but it's really a very understudied thing. And one of the reasons why is because those in power tend to check off a lot of the things.
Of course,
so
yeah.
you don't get a lot of funding for this. But his thesis after study, he's the foremost expert on psychopathy, right? And he created what is the diagnostic sort of checklist to check it off that they do for criminals and whatnot. His thesis is that it's somewhere between 1% and 7 to 8% of the population are these things, psychopaths, right? Born psychopaths. And that fundamentally what it is that they lack empathy. That they are predators. They're basically predators.
There's theories, though, of why they exist in society.
Well, they're very important. I mean, without psychopaths, they've been a part of the human experience for so long. They're like an inseparable. You could never separate them out. Some people are just born that way, and I mean, beings are predators, right? Like we are the most badass predator that has ever lived on this planet. If there had been Tyrannosaurus Rexes alive when human beings were around, they would be gone now because we would have eliminated. Like tigers, have you been next to a tiger? We put them in cages. You know what I mean? Sharks, great white sharks, we'll get down in a cage and swim around with them. And if we want that shark dead, we'll kill it tomorrow. Right? The only reason we're letting it swim around next to us and not kill it is because it's entertaining to us, right? To tease it, right? But we're not scared at all. This is just like an aspect, almost like an astrological sign, right? That like some people are just born and they are just full predator. And
so there's the theory though for that is for back in the day of tribal warfare.
Well, that, yeah.
It was selective. We needed these individuals for tribal warfare to have this blunt, moot type of emotions, not to be traumatized in fighting.
So natural selection would dictate that you would have that there is a cultural need for such individuals, and at certain times of crisis, you would definitely need them to fight against predators and other tribes and whatnot. And so it's like that can be moved in a positive way. But it can also be, it can do what it does. And so I think that it's very clear that the game of the central bankers has been, the people who rise to political power are a bunch of fucking psychopaths. We can manipulate them very easily with funds. And they don't care if they do it on the backs of their populations because their time horizon is quite short. But they also can be convinced in that moment, like you say, that like, no, don't you understand? This is really for the good of your people. And they believe it. They believe it because they believe that whatever they want, because they're supreme and better than everybody else, they're gifted from God. So whatever they want is good, and the people are just a bunch of plebs. And that's exactly what we've seen play out in this whole crisis. This idea that, no, you can't leave your home because I know how to keep you. You don't know how to keep yourself from getting sick. What? I can't make my own choice. I can't go out and wear a mask. I can't wash my hands or get sick. Now it's like they're like, oh yeah, okay, 20% of New Yorkers, it's more than that, have the antibody. So what you're telling me is that all these people got this virus, didn't get sick, and you locked them in their house. They were able to handle it, but you just decided that you knew better and you were going to lock them in their house. And that's what they're playing on. And so now we're going to see this mask revealed, who's really in control. The Fed's about to put a whole bunch of equities on their balance sheet.
They already did. They got the SPV. They bought all the junk bonds.
Crazy. Well, there's going to be more.
Well, they're talking about right now buying straight equity in the whole oil industry.
Come on.
That's centralized socialism right there, means of production.
And it's global.
Yeah.
Right. So that is truly supernatural.
Yeah. It's interesting though. There's a couple of trump cards though that could play out against them though. There's talks of states bringing back state money as it was before, United States before. There are, the wild cards, crypto, but it's still too small potatoes for them. It's not really a threat at the current moment, which is good. I want it to be incognito. Like, we don't exist. Shh. We're not a threat.
Great.
And then also like a lot of game theory though. So it's like I truly still believe there are a few people in government that want to do well, but they can't do well. Like anything, you know, laws of number, there are like a small percentage. I've heard rumblings of administration trying to pull in the Treasury to supersede the Fed, which would be an interesting power play as well. But I don't know, man. I think I think what you said earlier, the most beneficial thing for the United States would be the states realize that they have more power than the federal government, and they work together as a United States.
But they're not working together. You know, they're at each other's throats.
Yeah.
It seems like there's these little pacts that they're trying to do, right? The stronger governors, the Newsoms, the Cuomos, are trying to like pull in the neighboring states to have kind of regional pacts. But I don't think that. So here's my concern and my worry. My concern and worry is that these governors right now, they're a bunch of underachievers. And at most, I mean, at most they were like, they want to be president and they viewed this as a stepping stone for many of them, right? They're going to eventually run for president because they want to be president of the United States. But they're going to make the governorship attractive. As this continues on, the governorship is going to be a stopping point because it's going to be like, well, wouldn't I just rather be just president of California? Like, why would I worry about all the rest? And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of, yeah, you really would be. 5th largest economy in the world, or Texas, which is 10th largest, I think, if you just separate it out. And so my biggest concern is that this newfound power from the state side is going to attract some much more savvy and dangerous individuals into those state governor positions over the next 10, 15, whatever it is. And that we could have, you know, the next governor of California, the next governor of New York, next governor of Texas, Florida, be a real SOB. And that could be where things start to fracture into violence. Like I think the economic aspect of this is over. I think that we can pretty much see that there's a rebuilding process. What I'm the most concerned about is internal violence and oppression and tyranny. We haven't quite yet seen that. We've only seen it at the police level, but these governors are allowed to take it to the military level, unlike the president. Like the president can't use the US military for law enforcement, but these governors can use their National Guard, which is military. The National Guard and many of the other National Guards have served in Iraq and Afghanistan. You've got combat veterans with the full Bradley fighting vehicles in full fatigues, you know what I mean? Carrying military automatic rifles, like the whole nine, with an Air Force, with F-15s and the whole nine. And they can do law enforcement. And that's worrisome.
Yeah, I would agree, but you think they have more common sense to realize that the division would rip a country apart, where the smartest way, like United States could come out of this, if played right, like 10 times more powerful than before if they align with a common enemy, which is China, where they pull out of China. And the thing there, I'm kind of leaning towards that, where there's billions of dollars locked in China of hedge funds and government money that the China will not go whatsoever. And so my only hope, like I look at least casualties and how do you unify a group of people for the same cause? Like look at how beneficial it was where they had a unification against the USSR or against communism. The builds that they did, the moon race, like all this stuff, like the amount of industry that they built in that time was fucking ridiculous. And we never had that since. We've been this stagged out bullshit. Peter Thiel talks about it. We want to fly in cars. We got fucking Twitter. Whoopie fucking do.
Agreed.
You know, I talk to software engineer. I'm building new software. I'm like, fuck software. Like, don't be wrong. Like, I like software, but where's the hardware? Like, fuck.
Physical.
Yeah. Like,
yeah, we're making castles in the air at this point. I think that what I just don't see. I think you're right. I think that if there was some common enemy, let's say, that's not the virus that sticks you inside, some common enemy that forced people to build, then yeah, that could be possible. But I don't think that the central bankers are quite interested in the same type of nationalist behavior that has taken place in the past. And I'm not really sure. Like, I don't see what would even be the narrative against China. You know, they've been trying to spin it, oh, the Chinese virus and this and that. But I don't think that like the average American or the average Westerner really has an axe to grind against socialism, communism, China in general. I don't know.
Narratives they can spin the Hong Kong story. There's a bunch of stuff. It all like incentives is you have the powers that be. Okay, so status quo, the government, or you can call it. It's not just one. It's fracture. It's different elements within the government all fighting for control. No different than all states fighting. It just moves up the ladder, right? So now there's like this cabal of like 5 people saying, "Ha ha ha! I control everything." No. You know, always people think it's this Illuminati, like the secret society. I'm like, you give humans too much credit. Like, fuck me, man. No fucking way. We're too fucking dumb and greedy for that shit. Mm-hmm. And so you have these people like, listen, the status quo is good. And yeah, we're going to continue still bickering inside, but to shoot ourselves in our own fucking foot, you know what I mean? Like,
but that's being done. Right. I mean, I don't. We're going to have to see how the justification and rationalization of the destruction of the economy plays out. Right. So I think I've been waiting. Like, I've been waiting to see. And I said this early on. I tweeted about this. I said that the biggest problem with what's going on, and I said this a month and a half ago, is I said that when this is all shook out and we see that the virus wasn't what it was played up to be, that no one will take responsibility for their own actions in exacerbating this.
Oh, never.
And it'll happen again.
Yeah, but this is mimesis 101.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh no, for sure.
Not my fault. No fucking way. What? Can't be my fault.
Well, I've been waiting to see, is one governor going to step out and have a mea culpa? Like that would be the person who will go down as like a hero, but I don't think that they even understand that, right? So like if one governor was to step out and be like, you know what? Honestly, I blew it. The buck stopped at me. I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have gone along. I have a duty to you, the people. I blew it. I'm asking for your forgiveness, and let's work together to build this back up, right? That would be such a powerful statement that would basically shame the rest of the world. Yeah. If one state governor was to do that, and they would like basically finish out their term, they might become the president. But what's so interesting is that these people are political animals, but they're such sociopaths that they can't see that would be the way to go, right? That's how you turn the corner. And nobody wants to be the guy who says, "Oh, open up," and then something bad happens, right? They're playing this weird game, and so the double downs are not ending. That's the scary part about this whole thing, is that like each day that goes on, these governors double down for exactly like you're talking about, right? That it's not because they're nefarious or anything like that. The tyranny is coming from a set of perverse incentives. One, the incentive of the central bankers who are printing money, and the more of a victim you are, just as you say, the more money comes to you, right? And then on the other side, the idea of like, well, I can't, this is just my political career. I'm not going to admit that I made a mistake. And those two things combined is really, it's a perfect storm. So I think before we can talk about, you know, the potential of how people could come together, we've got to see just how far apart people fall. And I don't think that that's even really started yet.
Yeah, that's my only worry, man. It's human beings are very tribal, extremely tribal creatures. And you can see it already, small tears in society. Like I saw a video on Twitter today where a crazy woman, a teacher, obviously educating her kids, screaming at 2 Kids, like, these are kids, like 12 years old playing football in a fucking park. You should die from the coronavirus. I'm like, that's great role model of a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
well, let's stop on that for a minute, because it's like, what is that even, right? What is that? You know, like, you're wishing death on someone because they're what? They're not staying at home. You're out. You're walking. Is it because they're not doing some prescribed? They've moved outside of the prescribed action. And that slight movement, right? So if they were walking down the street, walking their dog, she says nothing.
Nothing.
But they pull it together too, right? They're walking down the street, walking their dog, just like she is. She says nothing. But if they are in an empty field, both of them together, throwing a ball around, then she wishes death on them.
This is, once again, example mimesis. It's not her speaking. It is the narrative speaking. It is the philosophy that she's been indoctrinated to speak. And so it's a reactionary element. You know, as Viktor Frankl talks about, the only thing that we can really control is our response to the stimulus, that small little buffer that we have. And so when we are stimulated by an external element, such as seeing something, two small kids, 12 years old, playing fucking football, it's a fucking pastime in the United States. She doesn't even think. This is not like, let me process what I'm visualizing. It's like, let me just regurgitate what I saw on CNBC.
But even to a greater degree, right? She has brought it so much into her being that she is personally offended by their actions, which have nothing to do with her.
Yes. But this is this is an example of people say, "Oh, that can never happen to me," like what happened in Nazi Germany. I'm like,
it's happening.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's right here. People are doing it. And this, I think that the fracturing, this is what I've been worried about in terms of the Civil War, and where I think that the states could possibly butt heads. And we're already starting to see it, is that some states are going to open up, other states are not. And as the time in between those, so like this week, we're starting to see some states, and they seem to be red states, southern states and whatnot, and the blue states are like still even closing in, right? So it's like, as the time gets longer, right, that the red states are open and these blue states are not, the blue state, some percentage of that blue state population, and you're seeing it in California in the Republican areas, so like the beach cities of San Diego, Orange County, these are Republican bastions. They have been for a very, very long time. People don't realize that. Like the congressional representatives from out of those districts are Republican, and they have been for a very long time. This is how people like Arnold Schwarzenegger got elected to be a governor, Republican governor of California, right? So as it goes longer, you're going to see these people start to act up, because they're going to be like, well, why the hell is Georgia? We got to have this. And that makes the government crack down. And I think that that's the point where you might start to see California shutting off its borders, excluding some travelers from other states.
Well, what happened in the past United States, like, for example, with the racial wars in like Alabama and Georgia, and then when JFK sent down federal orders, like, is there like examples that we can learn in the past of what's happened already?
Well, I think the difference is that in this case, in those cases, it was like the federal government and the states that were going along with the federal government against another set of states. But it seems very different in this case. Like, it seems like this has gotten out of Trump's control. He's and the media has helped in that, right? They've really hamstrung him. They played him, they strung him along, letting him have his daily press conferences, which is all he wanted, right? He wants to be on TV. And, he's even trumpeting his own ratings and everything. And the press likes it because they get to attack him.
Yeah.
He's a perfect foil for them. They've got tons of stories. They can just run story after story on Trump, and people watch it and whatnot. And in the meantime, the states are doing weird shit. We haven't yet had like true state on state like the thing with Florida and New York, where the Florida governor was like stopping New Yorkers at the airport with the National Guard and stopping plates. And then the Rhode Island governor did something similar. And then he was stopping Louisiana people. We haven't really had that where like they pick a state, where they're like, okay, this governor, and we haven't had that kind of thing happen. So there's no like historical analog. The federal government is just paying for all of it. Like all of these that's what people don't realize, that like, again, to your point about the money printer go burr and the states, they did this Title 32 thing, which is usually it would be if the governor calls up the National Guard, the governor pays for it. And if the federal government calls them up, like to send them off to war, the federal government pays for it. And in that case, they can't be used for law enforcement. But they've got this weird Title 32 thing, this law that basically says I guess the governor calls them up, but the federal government pays for it. And it was 75% federal government, 25% state government. Trump changed that, so it's 100% federal government. So like California is rolling out National Guard troops to guard food bank trucks now, right? The National Guard's going to be the ones distributing food, just like in like third world war-torn countries to refugees.
Or former Soviet to Russia, where you had to wait in line for bread 3 hours.
Well, but it wasn't being distributed by the military. Like right now, because they're worried that the food trucks are going to get hijacked, right? Which they will. It's happened. It happened in Italy. Like they would rob stores early in the morning and whatnot. So that's all being paid for by the federal government. So don't think that the governor of California is going to waste 1 minute calling out the National Guard when he doesn't have to pay for it. It's free. It's free. It's a free military. And that's true for all of these states that have signed these agreements with the federal government. And that's super worrisome.
Unless they make amendment, which they can.
We'll see.
At this point, there's what rules? It's like, oh, I don't care about your Title 32.
Yeah, the rules are really
what rules? What rules? Like what?
Yeah, agreed.
Like fuck, man. There's no rules anymore. If the Fed through an SPV buys equities in oils, what rules?
Yeah, there are none. There are none. And I think that's one of the most important things as individuals for people to come around to is you got to be like Winston in 1984. You got to realize, let's not talk about what's legal and illegal. Let's just talk about what's likely and what's not likely, right? And I think that like that's why it's important to have conversations like we're having, right? Where you take things to a logical conclusion. You say, okay, let's talk about here are the components, here are the variables, how might things play out? And then let's invest our time and energy leveraging those potential outcomes, right? So whether that's the financial investments that we make, whether that's changing the physical location where we're located if we think something's going to go down, whether that's maybe moving into a new business or engaging with certain individuals that we think might be important, toning down some of our rhetoric that we might have that may not be serving us well. All of those things, it's hyper important. But I think for those people who are like, oh, that would be illegal, or this would be illegal, or they can't do this because of this.
That's out the window, man.
That's out the window. That's out the window, man. It doesn't mean they're going to do everything, right? Like, I don't think that we have to be completely gloom and doom. I don't think that we have to say that it's going to be the worst case scenario. But like you say, it's behavioral economics. It's predictably irrational. Also, don't think that it'll always be rational behavior. It'll be irrational behavior, but like, how do human beings act? What would be predictable for them to do? And I think that there have been a lot of predictable moves. Like the one most predictable thing is that they're lying to you.
Yeah.
All of this is lies. That's the most predictable thing.
But this is why I bring up China, because that's the most predictably rational thing. Is like, well, we need someone to blame.
Yeah. And they're doing it. Right? Like they're trying with the blame. We should worry about that turning into a hot war, though.
I don't know, man. I don't know. The thing that gives America, even though the rules are out, all international capital rather have their capital in the United States than any other country on the planet, because at least there is a so-called rule of law and their capital can move out. Like S&P, the Dow, it's the most liquid market on the planet for the most part. And this is like, I always tell people, you like China? Why do Chinese come here that have money?
Mm-hmm.
Why do companies go public over here? Why aren't we going public in China? Like very basic fucking question, rudimentary questions. And so at least in the short term, 10 years, whatever, capital will flow into United States.
I think that's very predictable. It's just to what degree if we get to a situation where a hot war, maybe not on the mainland of China and the US, but even if it's proxy, if we get to, and who knows, this North Korea Kim Jong-un dead situation may be something there as well.
Yeah.
But if we get to a point where it's mutually beneficial, in the same way that it was with the USSR, I mean, the Cold War was beneficial to both sides.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Very beneficial. It broke the USSR, but from a cultural standpoint, it gave them vast influence in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's gone either way, really. Mm-hmm. It really, a few things go differently, and it's a totally different world. If we get right now, it's not mutually beneficial for there to be a hot war between China and the US, not at all. If we get to a point where it's mutually beneficial, that's when we got to start to worry.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what that would look like, but I don't think that it's beyond the realm of possibility if the economy is in some.
It's hard for China though, man. 90% of all their food is imported, and United States, like you mentioned, state by state protection of food. Well, United States guarantees the protection of all freights around the world, and they can pull their navy any given time. Like no one's protected. Have fun having Somalian pirates raid your fucking ship 24/7. No, I'm serious. Like not just Somalia, India, Japan. Japan doesn't like China. Have fun with them. You know what I mean? And they have the second biggest navy on the fucking planet after the United States.
I mean, it's not to say that the U.S. would, in such a hot war. That's why I think it's probably a proxy war is more likely.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Where it doesn't.
Which it could be Hong Kong.
Could be Hong Kong. Could be North Korea.
North Korea's interesting. I was in North Korea last year with government officials and tech companies, and I was talking with them, and we met with a bunch of expats, ex-escaped people at the DMZ zone, at the demilitary zone. And we talked, it was like a year and a half ago, and I was talking about it. And there's been a behind-the-scenes communication with people in North Korea. And even back then, they had this thesis that within even the faction of Kim Jong's family, right? Mm-hmm. So his sister is now next in line. And it's not that so people understand, for Kim Jong-un's family to remain in power, all the generals of the country must be happy. So the generals control the country. So they get paid in American dollars. They can fly out of the country. They have complete autonomy, right? So they're the elitists of the world of North Korea. Yeah. But what's happening right now, you mentioned earlier, their labor is not cheap anymore. I used to have a textile business. I had a fashion company before I got into crypto a decade ago, and I had our company in Guangzhou. And the labor costs right now, companies leave. They're in Vietnam, they're in Cambodia, they're in Thailand right now. And so they were predicting there could be a very small, but still a small opportunity where North Korea becomes this weird, still will be a dictatorship, but it will be a dictatorship very similar to Singapore. So it's still not a free nation. But if I'm looking at, is it better as a dictatorship as Singapore versus now, I'm like, I'd rather go to the dictatorship as Singapore versus what the fuck they have now. Right.
Yeah, this seems like the vision that also when Trump started his summits with Kim Jong-un, that he was also, people were like, what? Because Trump was like, along the border with China would be a great place for big factories, and we'd love to build that, and Kim Jong would love to build that as well. And people were like, wait a minute, what do you mean? But when you understand the change in the economics there and how their labor costs have changed, as you say, then it becomes obvious, like, you got to go to the next place. I mean, China bringing in African immigrants. That should be a.
In Guangzhou, there's 150,000 Nigerians. You go there, you would think you're in Africa.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, but that's the sign. You know that's the sign that you are losing your competitive advantage as a producer.
Yeah, you got to import labor.
Right? I think that goes to why this lockdown is so deadly, right? I mean, why it's so economically deadly. The pictures, I think, out of India are some of the deepest, because I mean, people move internally in India as immigrants, really. The migrant workers within India. And when India went into lockdown, man, there's tens of thousands of migrant workers trying to get on trains. Some of them are having to walk. Their children are dying in their arms as they're like walking and shit. Terrible, because there's just no work, and you lose everything. You lose everything, because even when your economy comes back online, that labor has left. And it's not just easy to get it back. And so at best, you can get local labor. So you've got two choices. Either one, everybody in that region gets paid less, or two, you've got to jack your prices up, which means that you price yourself right out of the market that you were in before, if those supply chains are even still open. And we're going to see this, what happens when you have this labor market that goes back insular again. And it's, dude, for me, the only thing that I can see on the horizon is violence. Like when you take down economies, again, it's just that maxim of when goods can't cross borders, armies will. It's human behavior. There's only two ways of getting resources from another human being. There's the political means and the economic means. The economic means is nonviolent, voluntary exchange, and the political means is war. That's it. And we haven't had big war for resources really since World War II. That's what the Germans were about. The Germans were trying to acquire resources, but we haven't had anything like that in the West. In the modern world, we've had these ideological wars, kind of wars for oil. It's not really. It's wars for like financial positioning of your currency is really what it's all about.
That's why they took out Gaddafi.
That's it. But it's not because we're going there to take their oil. I mean, that's like an old.
We don't need oil, man. You have too much oil in the world. Unforeseen amounts of oil.
There's plenty. It's more about being able to control the flow of oil, right? So to stop somebody from coming onto the market.
Correct.
Oil,
basically, right? the beers of oil, we control everything.
Exactly. It's controlling the supply lines and being able for there to be the OPEC cartel and Saudis dictate, as we're seeing going on in this oil war. That what we're going to see, I really do believe, is that we may see wars for resources break out again, which has been something that hasn't really existed in the modern world.
But are you talking about wars for resource as United States as a whole goes somewhere? The question is what resources really? United States, the thing with United States and Canada, people don't know is we have one of the most fertile land on the planet when it comes to farming.
Yes.
Very fertile. We have the most Great Lakes in the world, so we have natural water. We have the longest, with Canada, the longest unguarded border on the planet.
This is true.
And so you don't have neighbors that's going to attack you. So North America is pretty much, I consider one country.
It is. I mean, Canada and the States, even culturally, I think it's pretty much one country. Besides a few little cultural quirks, it's pretty hard to tell whether you're in like, Toronto or Boston. If I was to sit you down in a restaurant in the wintertime, it would be hard to know whether you were in one or the other. But no, it probably won't be in North America. It won't be in North.
But the question is, what are we fighting for then? What resources? Because we're resource heavy here. We're a resource economy. Like Canada's 90% of our GDP is all fucking resources.
It's going to be in places that are resource poor. I mean, you've got Hungary right now has a dictatorship, right?
Oh, for the longest, since the collapse of the fucking the wall.
but that was de facto. This is
Yeah.
official, right? So I think that, you know, Europe has closed its borders down. The Schengen zone whole idea is
Europe is a welfare state that's been a welfare state for fucking since World War. Like they're like nothing gets produced in Europe, and it's the people like they're the only way Europe can break out of its stupor would be the European Union to disappear and for the European dollar to vanish and for them to open up trade among countries to
close to that.
Yeah.
I think we're close. You know, I think that new currencies emerging is probably pretty likely. I think that these central bank digital currencies, I don't think we're going to see a global one. I think we're going to see many of them because they're going to be you're going to be able to easily transfer between them. There's no reason to create like the Uber one.
No, but the thing with the European, I always bring up the European Union because so my family's from former Yugoslavia. They try to, you know, there's a fucking technical term, balkanization, where you try to squeeze everybody in this hodgepodge of different people, and like, oh yeah, you guys are all one, but there's the most stickiest history even before Yugo, like such a fucked up region of the world. And like the brainwashing there that's a whole different conversation. But what do we have in common with Germans? Fuck all. What the fuck we have in common with Spaniards? Nothing. What does Ukraine have in common with fucking France?
Nothing.
No, there's no European identity. And this, you look at history, Europeans been fighting each other for fucking 1,000 years. Habsburg Empire, Austrian-Hungarian Empire, the Ottomans come in there, the Frankfurts come in there, the fucking Visigoths, the Goths. These damn tribes have been warring each other the whole time. I think for Europe to break free, you can have a European economic zone where it's like these are open trade, where anybody can trade with each other, but every country should have its own fucking currency.
Well, I don't see how things don't go in that direction now, right? I think the days of Germany just going along and sort of floating
everybody
is that's going to, like, it was bad before.
Yeah.
Right? It was bad before, but now Germany's going to suffer too. You know, I mean, they're going through the same situation. They've got a massive welfare state.
Huge, man.
They're paying
how much immigrants have to, because they have a very low birth rate, man. They've been importing immigrants since World War II. That's why they made a peace treaty. They made a war pact with the Ottomans, man. They got fucking cheap Turks to come in for labor.
Yeah, they've got the Turkish.
Bro, there's something like 2 million fucking Turks in Germany.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge there. But it's not like their economy is going to come roaring back. Nobody's economy is going to come roaring back. So, you know, when whether it's an individual, a company, a country, when you lose a massive amount of your wealth,
yes,
you become insular immediately, right? Like you hold on to what you have.
Yes,
you're cautious of people outside. You're only giving to your own. Like this is the nature of how human beings react. And when they open this shit back up, and people try to rebuild this economy, they're going to get back to ethnic, nationalist. All of that shit is going to emerge in a
hardcore. You're going to see xenophobia skyrocket. If the United States does take that road to go against China, you'll see xenophobia and racial slurs increase globally speaking.
Oh yeah.
And we could a good example to study how the economy will play out is very similar to the 10 plus years of the Japanese stagflation after their economy got crushed. So we'll probably dip. I wouldn't be surprised you see the S&P and the Dow down to even 20,000 points, like some people are predicting.
That's probably right.
And then it's going to be minimum a decade of.
Yeah. And during that period, you look at Japan, and I mean, it's not like they've never not been nationalist. But I mean,
fuck.
From then to now, I mean, it's incredibly nationalist, right?
Yeah.
Like they've returned to like.
One of the reasons why they're not more of a superpower is they refuse to adopt the English language.
Right. I mean, it's. I just think that all of these experiments are now out the window, and the central banks had been pushing them, but I think they've all failed. Like all of these ideas that you were going to have some sort of global hegemony of a single currency, these single sort of governments, whether it's the EU or whether it's, this North American Union that they were talking about, free trade pacts that went across whole continents and whatnot. I think that's all out the window, man. Like, and it's not even necessary for control. It's not necessary for the central banks to do their thing. Divide and conquer is actually going to be much better.
Oh, it's easier.
Yeah, and you're going
to
see.
Just all right, kill you. You guys kill yourselves. Here you go.
And so, it's going to be in the places that are nationalist plus, and I'm not saying that this is in the short term, right? This is probably not in the next 5 years. It's going to take a changing of the guard, the political guard, right? So we may be talking 10 years, we may be talking 15 years, but I think that this is the path that we're on. Like, this is the slide that we're going down. It's not going back to the trajectory that things were on, which was coming together. Now what the trajectory is, end of the empire breaking apart.
Yeah. We'll see. I think my attention would be obviously America, China. I'm very, very interested what happens with the India relationship with United States. That's super important to the supply chain, especially for medicine. People understand a lot of our pharmaceutical supply comes from India. Sun Pharma, one of those big billion-dollar companies there. And if United States was smart, they would renegotiate the NAFTA agreement with Canada and make a stronger alliance with Canada. Canada's the only one, I would call it anomaly when it comes to that. We're Canadians, but it's not like in Toronto, it's all immigrants. Like most people escape somewhere that sucked. That came, you know what I mean? It's like I came from somewhere that sucks to here. Yeah. So it's not like we have this history of the United States where we had a civil war and this nationalism and I'm American. That the American ho-ha, fuck you, middle finger type of thing doesn't really exist in Canada. Like there is that Canadian pride, but it's not like that. Like because there's literally the root of Canada is so many fucking different immigrants.
Yes, well, and it always has been.
Oh, from day one.
Yeah, it's always been a multi-ethnic society. Which is even evidenced by the fact of having two languages as a culture from the, as a country from the beginning. And North America, it will be interesting to see what happens with the US and Canada. I thought that the closing down of the borders was really weird. I thought that was a huge signal. That particular border is like, there's not even a cultural border there, really. You know what I mean? Like people don't know like how many celebrities in Hollywood are that you might think are American celebrities are actually Canadians. You know what I mean? Tons. The culture and music the same way and
if you know what they would do to propagate our economy to be better, and I think it's a benefit for both. It'd be similar to what was the fucking fiat agreement they had where they had to control the currency. It happened in
Bretton Woods.
Bretton Woods, yeah. The American dollar is gonna. So I had Brent Johnson on here from what's his fund called? Anyways, he has this fund. So he has a famous theory, the Milkshake Theory, where he predicts that because of the U.S. being the hedge of the world and quote unquote safest country per se of trust, and because of its military, all these different factors, it becomes the milkshake of liquidity. So very similar to Gresham's law, good money drives out bad money. Everybody wants the US dollar, but this propagates the value of the US dollar up, therefore making trade very difficult, right? But it's a benefit for the United States. Like let's say you're in Silicon Valley and you're paying local developers $1.60, $1.70 plus equity. You can get the same talent in Toronto for 80,000 Canadian. And you have a 30% premium on your dollars, so you're really getting it for $50,000. Like, okay, fucking sign me the fuck up.
Right.
It's a win for us. It's like, sure, I can work remote. It doesn't matter. So I think there's a lot of opportunities if the dollar does do that, which I think it will, for even like United States and Canada to do a very similar thing what the EU did not to that degree, but they've talked about this a million times. They've never done it. So currently, there's that immigration thing, the Nexus Pass between Canada and the United States. Yep. But that's erroneous bullshit, long process. It has nothing to do with the economy. It's like, I think it's one of the dumbest things ever. Just make a fast-forwarded pass where people can go in and out for mobility, for commerce. Sure. We want the US dollar. Fucking Americans, come here.
Of course.
And you guys want to come here. Like, wait, I can go to Toronto and I can be at like a 5-star hotel and only pay like $120 a night and then have like a Michelin star restaurant for like $200.
Toronto's the shit, dude. Like Toronto in like the, not dead of summer, but Toronto when it's warm is...
It's dope.
One of the best places you could possibly, like by far some of the most like best food, like just the style of people. People are super, super hip. Like everything is just good. You know what I mean? Everything is good.
Wintertime sucks, man. Fuck, this is my last winter here. I'm done. I'm fucking gonzo. I don't know where. Maybe Mexico. I don't know, but I'm fucking gone. That's a fact. Fuck that, man. It's bad, bro. Quarantine, but there's a bright side. Quarantine's easy.
Oh, in the winter? Yeah.
Sure. Bro, it's like -2 the other day, man. Why the fuck would I want to be outdoors?
Yeah, but people are going to lose their mind when it starts to warm up a little bit in like 45 days.
Well, we have our first test this weekend. I don't know what it is Fahrenheit, but it'll be 17 degrees.
Okay. So that's like 60 something?
Yeah, like, nice t-shirt weather, yeah.
Yeah. That's like go swimming weather in Canada.
Oh, bro. Patio weather is 5 degrees. Yeah, 5 degrees. Hey, that's patio weather, man. Fuck. We're good to go on the fucking patio, man.
I mean, to your point, it as things get insular, I think that the relationship between Canada, United States, and Mexico is probably going to be as strong as it's ever been.
It only makes sense, man, to have like this trifecta of like economic benefits for everybody.
I mean, and those are three powerhouse countries. In terms of, Mexico is just talk about resource rich. It's
ridiculous.
It's not really exploited to the degree that it could be, but in terms of from agricultural resources to fucking oil to minerals to, the fisheries, you name it, man. It's like, it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And labor.
Mm-hmm.
So it is just a wealth. And then in terms of talent from at high technical and skilled positions, Canada, like per capita, it's just killing it. So the U.S. is going to need that. The U.S. is going to need, I think, a lot of help. I think that the states being separated from each other and allowed to compete against each other, we might see some interesting things on the borders. We might see states trying to do some. We already see places like California that are saying, "Oh no, sanctuary, right? Like sanctuary cities. We're going to do this whole situation." And what that basically is saying is that we're just going to flout the work visa regulations. That's what a sanctuary city fundamentally means, right? Because what's the punishment for getting busted for working without a visa or whatever? You get deported. Well, no, we're not going to do that. So it could be interesting to see what happens along the border. If some of these, like let's say Michigan, for instance, the governor's not having a good time with the federal government. These are the types of things that could potentially happen. It would be advantageous for the United States if the states would start competing against each other in that way.
It would. Game theory. I always said city-states. You want to have a true republic, have city-states, make them pay up a tiny bit of tax for federal army to have a national army to protect them, because the state army can't do federal wars. So everybody pays up the ante for the federal protection and the federal police to guarantee civil laws of private property. Without private property, there is no society. Forget that society. Like, you don't have one. Might as well fucking become your own military if there's no private property protection. And then states compete. No different than like, hey, you go to Texas, no income tax, or some other jurisdictions, for like corporate tax, like what's the big one in states?
Well, Nevada has no corporate tax. I think
Nevada. What's the other one big one? Also, Silicon Valley. Delaware. Yeah, Delaware.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
or in Puerto Rico, like go down there as a territory and have no capital gains tax either.
I'm all about the territories. I'm all about the territories.
This is why you guys have it good. We're fucked in Canada, man. We got high taxes. Like I can't go anywhere. I can't do anything. Each province is pretty much the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if it's I guess the difference that has been given up in terms of the American experience is the immigration and customs is uniform, right? So it's like, and you've got the federal tax.
Yeah.
But if you can compete on your taxes and you can compete on your customs and immigration, that's where you kill it.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Oh yeah, that tariff that this state up here is doing, we're not going to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But he comes across the border.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the New Yorkers going to New Hampshire to buy liquor, top shelf liquor, because that was a big thing that New Yorkers would drive up there because their liquor taxes. They'd buy top shelf liquor and basically buy it at half price.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'd come back and they'd sell it. They'd bootleg sell Hennessy and all this stuff out the back of their car to the strip clubs. You know, and so the state of New York was actually following people, like scoping them out and the whole nine. And the state of New Hampshire was like, we're not even going to touch it because the state of New Hampshire runs the liquor stores.
Yeah,
they're state-run liquor stores, right?
Same here. Everything's state-run liquor stores. Yeah.
So they're like, no. We didn't see it. We didn't see anything happen. You know, I think there's a lot of opportunities for this. I think in some ways it's inevitable that it's going to happen. The question is just, you know, how soon do they figure that shit out?
Mm.
And to what level of tyranny do we get before one of these states is like, we're no longer participating in this, you know? And what do California and New York and Texas look like is very, very important. You know, what looks like, what Michigan looks like, Michigan's not a strength anymore. You know, what Oregon or Washington looks like is not as important as like, what does New York look like? What does California look like? Texas, Florida, you know? So I don't know. We'll have to wait. We'll have to wait and see, but it's going to be interesting for sure.
Yeah, and we'll leave it at that, man. We've been jamming for an hour and a half about this long time. Great talk, man. Yeah. If people want to get to know more about you, I know you run a couple of different things. You have a lot on the go, but what's the best resource for them to check out?
Well, certainly Twitter at Vin Armani, but I've got a newsletter called Counter Markets that is it's called Trends and Strategies for Maximum Freedom is sort of the tagline on it. And it is an agorist newsletter. So we're talking about liberty through the vein of counter economics. So we're talking about economic trends. We get into things like cryptocurrency, but we also get into things like AI and 3D printing. We've got an awesome mastermind group on Telegram as well for subscribers only. And we're about 3 years in on this. And we've been predicting a lot of this. So if people want to go and check that out, you can actually get your first issue for free, which is the current issue. We always offer the current issue for free. And you can see if you want to check it out and subscribe. That's at countermarkets.com. But yeah, besides that, man, Twitter has been where I'm at recently, sort of narrating the end of this empire. And you know, I appreciate you having me on, man. It's always stimulating. I always enjoy speaking with you.
Likewise, man. Thanks again.
Thank you, brother.